This conference will now be recorded.
So in the last class, we started with servlets. So for that, we have developed a servlet in Eclipse. So the first step is we have to configure server in Eclipse workspace, only one-time process. Then we have created a dynamic web project. In that dynamic web project, we have created a servlet, right? Now, once we create the servlet, when we run this servlet, it is going to start the server and it opens the browser with this client URL, and this is the response what it is going to provide to us, right? So this is the client URL. Let me elaborate about this client URL today. In this one, HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Localhost. Why we are getting localhost? Because we have installed Tomcat server in our local machine. That's the reason we are getting localhost. So if the server is present in other machine, we have to provide the IP address or host name of Tomcat server. We have to provide the location details of Tomcat server. Then 8080, it is the port number where Tomcat server is running. Web project, this is the project name or application name. Project name or application name. Then welcome servlet. This is the main thing to discuss here. What is this welcome servlet? We think that welcome servlet is the name of the class what we have created. This is not the name of the class. This is not the name of the class. Here this welcome servlet, whatever you are seeing here along with the URL, client URL, this we call with a special name URL pattern. So understanding this URL pattern concept is important for us. Let us understand more of this URL pattern. So for this, understand carefully very important points during interview times. Whenever we are making a request to a web application, whenever we are making a request to a web application, the server loads a file called as web.xml file. Understand? When a request is made to a web application, the server loads web.xml file. What is this web.xml file? Web.xml file is the deployment descriptor or configuration file required for web applications. Okay. In a web application, we can have only one web.xml file. In a web application, we can have what? Only one web.xml file. Web app, it's an important question. Web app is the root element of web.xml file. Web.xml file is present in web.inf folder. So where web.xml file is located means what is the answer? You should say web.inf folder. So here, let me open and show you. So you can see web project now. If you expand it, you can see SRC. Under SRC main, under main web app. This is related to Eclipse I am explaining. Then under web app, you can see web.inf. Under web.inf, you can see web.xml file. If you expand, open and see the source, see the root tag is web app. So where web.inf is located, it is present in web project slash src slash main slash web app folder. But for interview purpose, you should remember web.xml file is present in web.inf folder. So whatever the tool you may use, like you may go for Eclipse or you may go for IntelliJ, like that. So whatever the ID you may use, but finally we should remember it is located in web.xml, web.inf folder. Now, see the root tag here, web app. Let me elaborate more on this. So the root tag is web app, which goes with the two subtags, servlet and servlet mapping. Servlet and servlet mapping. Under servlet, it goes with a subtag servlet name. By default, your Eclipse is going to give servlet name as your class name. In our case, what is the name of the class? Welcome servlet. Next one, servlet class. Servlet class. What is the servlet class here? What is the name of the class? Welcome servlet only. Servlet class. Then under servlet mapping, it goes with the servlet name. By default, your Eclipse will give servlet name as your welcome servlet class name only. And the next important one is URL pattern. URL pattern. By default, Eclipse will give us your servlet class name only. That's the reason we mentioned this one as what see. So whenever we make a request to this welcome servlet, this whatever you are seeing, this is not called as class name. We call with a special name URL pattern. So let me elaborate more on this. If you make servlet name as welcome, servlet class must be welcome servlet only. Servlet name welcome, and URL pattern I am saying well. URL pattern I am saying well. Then, based on above web.xml file, client URL to access welcome servlet is http://localhost:8080/ the project name /well. Now, whenever you make a request to a web project, what I said, it's going to load web.xml file. And once it loads web.xml file, sees the URL pattern as well. So for this well, what is the servlet name? Welcome. Goes to this welcome and runs welcome servlet. Simple final conclusion to remember is URL pattern is like alias name for your servlet classes. URL pattern is like what? Alias names for your servlet classes. So in the complete web applications, whenever you want to refer to a servlet in your program, we have to refer to servlet by using URL patterns only, not with servlet class names. That's the final point to remember over here. Right? Let me prove these words. So if you go to this web.xml file, I'll make servlet name as welcome. Servlet class must be welcome servlet name welcome, and URL pattern well. See now, when we run this welcome servlet now, it will ask you to restart server. Any modifications to web.xml file or servlet, it will ask you to restart server and observe the URL pattern. What is the URL pattern it's showing? See, well here. You can see the URL pattern, see, well. Okay, so final conclusion, whenever you want to refer to a particular servlet, we refer to a servlet by using URL patterns, not with servlet class names. That's a final conclusion to remember here. Clear everyone? Any questions? So I'll be recapping this URL pattern again and again. Okay, so maximum whenever we go for web applications, we think of URL patterns.
That one question, what's
Yeah.
the web project
This is your
project
project name.
slash project name? Okay.
Project name only your web project.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Right. Now, now let us move to the major important topic of today's class. Reading HTML form data into a servlet. What is the use of HTML form? Is used to accept the user input. Whatever the input you want to accept from user, we have to create HTML form. Like when we open Gmail, we get username, password. When we go for banking applications, it will ask username, password. When you go with the transfer funds, it will ask you the account details to transfer, like that. So whatever the user input we are giving, that we do by using HTML forms. Now, once we fill the data in HTML form, how to read this form data into Servlet? Once you read into Servlet, whatever you want to do with the data, it depends on the application. Yes, Kalyani?
Sorry, by miss.
Okay, no. This is very, very important. This concept we will be using till end of our course. Let us create one HTML form. Like example, emp.html. Here we'll create a form where we accept the details like employee number, employee name, employee salary. Then we create one submit button. We go with the text fields so that the user can fill the value in the text fields. And one submit button. Now let us fill the data like employee number like 111, employee name some name, employee salary some salary. Now when we click on this submit button, we'll connect to a servlet here. We'll connect to a servlet. Let me go with the name of the servlet as EMP servlet. Let me go with the name as EMP servlet. And this EMP servlet will read this form data and we want to display the response in tabular format. We want to show this employee details in tabular format. The response what we want to give is we want to display this data in tabular format like this. Here we go with the headings like employee number, employee name, and employee salary. And here we go with the values what you have filled in the form like 111, the name and salary. Now how to read this form data into Servlet? That's a major task here. So in order to read this form data into Servlet, we should give the name to the form fields. Here we are giving the name like for this text field ENO, ename and salary. By using the form field names only, we can read this form data into Servlet. How to read is by using a method request.getParameter method. By using which method? Request.getParameter method. So you can see this method is used to read HTML form data into a servlet. Like example, you can say string rename equal to request.getParameter of rename. In this one, this ename is your Java variable, and this ename what you are giving in double quotes is HTML form field name. So whatever the value we have entered in this HTML form field name ename, this value Raj will comment stored into Java variable ename. And by seeing this, you can easily say the return type of request.getParameter method is what? String. Remember, very important point. I'll be keep on asking. The return type of request.getParameter method is string. Remember this. Right? Now, let us develop this complete application. Create a HTML file, emp.html in web project. How to create HTML file in web project is open Eclipse, right click on web project, simply right click on web project and say new. In the list you can see HTML file. Right click on project and say new HTML file. Go with the name emp.html. Now design the form. Directly we can use form tag here. Using HTML tag, body tag, all are optional for us. So form action equal to, this is important, action equal to web project / emp servlet. Means when you click on submit button, which servlet you want to connect. So we want to connect to a servlet, emp servlet, located in web project. Then design the form, employee number, input type equal to text, name equal to EN1. Names are important here. Employee name, input type equal to text, name equal to ename, employee salary, input type equal to text, name equal to salary. In one submit button, input type equal to submit, value equal to submit. Now, when we click on this submit button, it connects to EMP servlet. Let me document how to create HTML file. Right click on web project and say new HTML file. It will ask you the file name, giving it as emp.html and click finish. Now let us create a servlet. Create a servlet, emp servlet in web project. Already we know how to create servlets. And finally, run the application emp.html. We have to run from the welcome page. The first page what we show to the user, that we call welcome page. Mainly HTML files will become welcome pages. Now create a servlet, right click on project and say new servlet. Give the class name as emp servlet. Import the related packages. In this program, we'll even see do post method. In the post, we are just invoking do get. Now, the first step, what we need to do, we need to connect to the browser from where we got request. So, what is the first statement here? Print writer out equal to response dot get writer. Now, read the form dot into servlet. How to read? Take here string envo equal to call the method request dot get parameter of envo. That's it. This is the way to read form data. String ename equal to request dot get parameter of ename. String salary equal to request dot get parameter of salary. After reading this form data, now we want to display this data in tabular format. So create a table. How to create table in HTML? By using table tag. So go with the table tag, table border, then create a row. How to create row? All the HTML tag should go in between double quotes of out.println. Create a table row. In first row, we go with the table heading, employee number, then table data, the value of employee number. Close your TD, close your TR. Similarly, Go with other rows. Out.println, create a table row, th employee name, ed, the value of employee name. Here, th employee salary, ed, the value of salary. Finally, close our table. We are using HTML tags here in between out.println. That completes our servlet. Now run the code from emp.html. So it is asking the form data, fill the data like employee number, employee name, and salary. Once we click on submit button, it's going to show our data in tabular format. Got it, everyone? Any questions? Right? Now, observe very important thing. What are the form data we have entered? Is that visible in your client URL? See here? The data what you have filled in the form, it is visible in our client URL. Let us suppose if the user is filling some passwords, then someone sitting beside us can see the passwords what we are typing. Okay. So first of all, why the data is visible in URL? So why the data is visible in URL is by default the method call for your HTTP. The default method call for your HTTP will be get here. So when the method call is get, the data goes along with the URL. Even you are using method attribute or not, by default method call will be get here. Then when the method is get, the data goes along with the URL. Then when the method is get, it will go to servlet and invokes doGet method. It's going to invoke what? doGet method. So by default, the method call what it is going to do? doGet method. Now if you want to send the data as a separate page, we don't want to make data visible in URL, then we have to make the method call as post. So when you make method call as post, the data goes as a separate page, not visible in URL. Then it will go to doPost method. In doPost, you are internally invoking doGet method here. So the suggested programming is always override doGet and doPost method. In doGet method, handle the request, and in doPost method, invoke doGet method. So that your servlet code is independent of method call, because HTML program is written by some other programmer, servlet code is written by some other programmer. If HTML programmer uses method as get, however, the code is present in doGet method. If HTML programmer uses the method call as post, however, you are invoking doGet method from doPost method. So always suggested the way to create servlet is override doGet method and doPost method, handle the request in doGet method, and invoke doGet method from doPost method. Now see, when you run your HTML file, fill the data. Now see, when we click on submit, is the data visible in URL now? See the data what you have filled is not visible in URL, right? So mainly when your form contains passwords, in the case of passwords, we use post method. A very important intro question. Get wise post. In case of get method, the data goes along with the URL, means visible in URL. Whereas in case of post method, the data goes as a separate page. Separate page means not visible in URL. Okay, so final conclusion to remember is When your form contains passwords, make use of post method. Got it, everyone? Any questions? Right? One more point here. This EMP servlet, whatever you are mentioning, this is what here we want to call it as servlet class name. We have to call with what special name? We have to call it as URL pattern. Mentioned just now. Whenever we create a new servlet, it's going to update your web.xml file. It's going to create a servlet here. See, it has created servlet with servlet name EMP servlet, servlet class name EMP servlet. In servlet mapping, servlet name EMP servlet, URL pattern EMP servlet. So here, since by default Eclipse will give URL pattern as class name, that's the reason we have mentioned as EMP servlet. If our URL pattern is some XXX, if this is XXX, then here we are to write here instead of EMP servlet XXX. So always remember, whenever you are referring to a servlet, we are to refer to servlet using URL pattern, not with servlet class name. URL patterns are like alias names for your servlets. Clear? Any questions? Right? Now, let us move to the next two important small topics. They are important for intro time only. That is servlet config interface, servlet context interface. Servlet config and servlet context. So what is the use of this servlet config interface? This interface is used to read initial parameters from web.xml file into a particular servlet. From web.xml file also, we can send some data to servlet. That data we call initial parameters. To read that data, we make use of servlet config interface. And servlet context interface is, this interface is used to read context parameters. Context parameters means global from web.xml file into all servlets of web application. Any servlet can read this context parameter. Config is like local, context is like global. Now let us understand these two using a program. Servlet config demo.java create like a servlet, and we pass initial parameters from web.xml file. Let us initially see this. Let us create one servlet. Servlet config demo. Now import the related packages. Let me just go with only do get method here. So whenever we create a new servlet, your web.xml file will get updated here. In your web.xml file, it has created a new servlet with the servlet name, servlet config demo, servlet class, servlet config demo. Now to the servlet config demo servlet, we want to pass some initial parameters. How to pass is in between the servlet tag, wherever you see servlet config demo, in between that, we have to pass initial parameter like this. Init param name, username, param value, admin. Username is admin. Like that, you can pass one more init parameter. Init param name, password, param value, something else, a root. So like that, how many initial parameters you want to pass, we can pass. So in between the servlet tag, to whichever the class you want to pass some initial parameter, in between that servlet tag only, we have to pass the initial parameters. Now, how to read these initial parameters into the servlet now? How to read is, so in doGet method, the first step, connect to the browser, print writer not equal to response dot. Now, how to read this initial parameter from web.xml file is, we have to create reference of servlet config. Servlet config equal to, call the method get servlet config. If you remember last class, get servlet config, it's a method of servlet interface. Get servlet config is what? It's a method of servlet interface. Okay, and which class implements servlet interface? Generic servlet. So this get servlet config is a method implemented by generic servlet class. So this method is implemented by generic servlet class. And since HTTP servlet is a subclass of generic servlet class, we can invoke this method directly. Now, which class implemented get servlet config method means the answer what we should remember, generic servlet class. That's only the point to remember here. Now, by using this config reference, we can read the initial parameters like this. String username equal to config dot get init parameter of username, and password equal to config dot get init parameter of password. Now display the values. Out.println username, the value of username, out.println password, the value of password. That's it. Now see, when we run, we get the username as admin, password as root here. Clear everyone? Any questions? Right? Let us move to the next one, servlet context. What is the main use of this? To read context parameters from web.xml file, and any servlet can read this. So it's like global. Let us understand with the program. Servlet context demo. Create like a servlet and web.xml file. In between this web.xml file, in between web app tag, we have to pass the context param like this. In between web app tag, we have to pass like this. Context param name, This is some gold rate, param value from 50,000. In between web app tag, we have to pass this context param. Now create a servlet, right click on project and in new servlet, servlet context demo. Import the related packages. First step, connect to the browser from where we got request, print rate route equal to response dot get data. Then say servlet context equal to, call the method get servlet context. Same explanation. Get servlet context, it's a method of servlet interface, and this method is implemented by generic servlet class. And since HTTP servlet is a subclass of generic servlet class, we can invoke the method directly. So this method is implemented by generic servlet class. Now take the value of gold rate now and text dot get init parameter of gold rate, same method name. Now if you print the value of gold rate, it's going to display it as, see here when we run, it's going to display the gold rate as 50,000. So these two concepts are important for interview time only. In reality, we are not using these concepts now. Only for interview purpose, we should remember this. I'm even documenting how the web.xml file looks. In between web app tag, we have to go with the context param. In between that, we have to pass the parameters here. Any questions, anyone?
Sir, why are we using this
Why are we using?
parameters? Is it like program to show
Yeah,
the output?
application. Yeah, it's like giving some data from web.xml file to your servlet. This is not user input. This is internal data. Like simple example, I want to provide database connection properties. So database connection properties will be given by end user or programmer only?
Programmer.
Programmer, right? So that information we provide in web.xml file. From there we read database connection data and we use it in our servlets. That I'm going to show you practically in next class tomorrow. Okay, Kalyani. What is the use of it? You will understand really in tomorrow's class. Tomorrow we develop one big application like login application where we connect to database to check whether user is authenticated or not. That application I'm going to show you tomorrow. In that I'm going to make use of these concepts.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
So we are passing these parameters in the configuration file to
Right.
connect to the web server.
Servers, databases, not server here. Databases. Generally we use in that cases. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So the real picture where we use this concept that we'll understand tomorrow. Okay. Okay, so tomorrow don't miss the class. Tomorrow the last part of servlets where I'm going to discuss login application, and after that we'll go with session tracking. So tomorrow we complete servlets, then next class we'll start up with JSP. Right? Thank you all.